some of you have already had to respond to this new requirement. It is the prior living situation requirement. But HUD is requesting more information about some of the participants that are enrolled into your continuum of care grants about their prior living situation if it does not meet HUD's requirements. I'm going to introduce Melanie Mondello, who's from the Technical Assistance Collaborative. She will be presenting our training today, so I will let her take it away. And for those of you who are just joining us, if you can put your name and agency in the chat, I would greatly appreciate it.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Christy, and thank you everyone for making time. I know December is a very busy month. Like Christy said, my name is Melanie Mondello, and I work for TAC, or the Technical Assistance Collaborative, and we have been helping Christy with the new APR requirements, among other things in New Hampshire. So today, like Christy said, we are going to talk about continuum of care program reporting, specifically the prior living situation that you or a member of your team is entering into HMIS. So before I jump into the tool that we developed and the instructions for that tool so you can see what's going to be expected of you going forward, I wanted to give a little background on the requirement in case there's new people or in case people coming on board later and are watching this video understand the context for why we're asking this so we don't create confusion. So basically, when you have a continuum of care program, HUD requires that you only serve eligible people per their definition of homelessness. Depending on the type of project you are, you're going to have different definitions of homelessness. So a PSH might be restricted to a category of literal homelessness for people who are meeting the chronic homeless definition. Rapid rehousing may have a different homeless definition. The homeless definition is published in the Federal Register, but each year when you apply to HUD for funding, they can modify and shrink or expand who can actually come into any program in any given year. So I just want to lay that groundwork of there's the regulation and then there's your application and what HUD says you can do each year. So at its core, COC program participants are supposed to be what HUD would consider literally homeless. So literally homeless would be living on the streets, unsheltered, encampments, emergency shelters, hotels paid for by charities or other emergency funds. There is some allowance for a category 2, which means there may be people that are doubled up, but that is not the case in New Hampshire right now for your rapid and your PSH programs. So when HUD wants to see people who are literally homeless entering their programs, that's easy if you're the first person touching this person and if you're not a domestic violence program or you're not serving a lot of people that are fleeing domestic violence. So if you're taking a referral, I'm the applicant, Christy has an opening, I get referred to her, I'm staying at a shelter. Easy, right? It's a shelter, HUD deems that as a acceptable place to enter from, no extra data entry or explanation required. But if I'm fleeing domestic violence or some other violent situation that's allowed by HUD in the expanded category 4 definition, then I might look like I'm coming from just a doubled up situation, but I'm also fleeing domestic violence. So therefore my data, if you look at me just from a numbers point of view, it's going to look like I shouldn't have been allowed into that rapid rehousing program. It's going to look like I shouldn't have been given a bed and shouldn't be getting rental assistance. So the reason that we're here today is because HUD realized that all the reports that they're getting from you, from your recipients, when they're doing their annual reporting cycle, it looks like a good number of people are not eligible for the program that they're in. So what they have asked, what they've mandated, is that now, instead of just telling them I served 15 people and this is where they came from, and then relying on your charts to make sure you're doing the right thing. With each annual report that Christy and her team has to submit, they want to know that you know that those people were eligible. So we'll go into some of those examples. The other thing that changed in the landscape is when you do a transfer from one PSH program to another PSH program, or one rapid program, rapid rehousing program, RRH to a PSH program, again, it can look like I'm not eligible because I'm coming from permanent housing. Why would you allow the person into the program? So all the changes and improvements that HUD was making over the years, it kind of broke the APR reporting a little bit, which means there's a new form, and that's what we're going to go over today. So just a little background on why. Everything I say today does not change eligibility. It does not change coordinated entry referrals or prioritization in your community. It doesn't mean you can admit people that aren't literally homeless or don't meet the criteria of that Christy gives you as the recipient passing to you as subrecipient. So people are getting confused about that. We're talking about a data tracking thing in HMIS, not eligibility at the front door to the program. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to put up. So this on my screen right now, what you see is an excerpt from the HUD instructions that added this new requirement. So what HUD did is, as of June 1st of this year, 2024, all COC programs have to give a written explanation for any head of household or adult who enters from a situation other than literally homelessness with all of their annual report submissions. So you can see here, these two here, the homeless situation, institution, they're gray. So anybody who in HMIS is entered from a shelter, unsheltered, Christy doesn't have to type in an explanation, and you as subrecipients don't have to track that. Anybody that's in any of these categories who might have still been eligible at the front door, but their data entry is making it look like they weren't eligible, then you have to give an explanation. And to be able to give an explanation, Christy needs information from you. So the explanation can be pretty short. It could be, for this particular example, 3 people came from temporary living situations or transitional housing. And here you have to say why. You can say 3 people came from transitional housing. They were formerly in emergency shelter prior to, that's why they're still eligible. You can see here 2 people came from temporary living situations. Why? You explain it here. All of this information you see to the left is auto-generated based on what you and your staff are typing into HMIS. So the way this works is you're typing into HMIS. As soon as you get the information, you're saying, Melanie entered the program. This is where she's living. You fill all that out. It's wonderful. Christy gets a report, uploads it to the HUD system, which is called Sage. And then when she hits go, this table pops up and it asks her, like, okay, you just gave me a file that said this information. Please explain for these people what's going on. So Christy doesn't know until she takes your HMIS data and pops it into the HUD reporting system, which is called Sage, what information she's going to have to type into this box. So this table here, you can imagine what the flow your projects have. We don't want to have to call you and say, okay, there's 3 people, let's find them and explain them. Instead, what we did was we created a spreadsheet to be able to capture that information as the year goes on. You'll submit that document to Christy with your APR material at the end of grant term. And then when HUD system, electronic computer, asks her this question, she'll be able to sort that spreadsheet and be able to type in this information, hopefully without having to go back to your team and ask for very quick turnaround answers. Okay, so that's the form itself. I'm just gonna scroll down a little bit, try not to make us dizzy. You're gonna get this 1-pager as well as the spreadsheet. These instructions on how to complete the spreadsheet are also in the spreadsheet itself. I just thought it was easier to read here also. So I'm not going to read this to you right now. We're going to go over to the spreadsheet. I'm going to show it to you. But just know, like, everything I say is going to be in the explanations about like which column, when to fill it out, what information you're going to be able to need to be able to do this. And then you can see at the bottom, here's Christie's, right, homework. Once you get it to her, this is what's going to happen on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and flip over to the spreadsheet. We
Melanie, I'm
tried
just
to,
going to,
yeah,
can I just chime in really quickly? For
please.
most of you, and correct me if I'm wrong, this information comes from question 15 of your annual performance report, which is the prior living situation. So when all of you generate your CSV files and are taking a look at them, this is question 15. So
Good
you
call
can
out.
see where people are entering from so that you can figure out which participants you're going to need a response from. But we're really looking for you to track this throughout the year so that when it comes time for you to submit that annual performance report, you're not scrambling to figure out who these participants are.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. So what
Angie
we
has
were,
a question.
oh, Angie, go ahead.
So, I know this is something that I've worked on with you guys for, but I just have a few quick questions and I understand why HUD's asking for this. But what do we do? Because I think I had two of these I had to answer for Christy. One was, a child was born. So, I mean, they were in the womb. What do we say for that? And
Okay.
then two, the other one was the head of household who met the criteria for the program. Their partner moved in with them because they were getting married.
Mhm. Great questions.
So,
So this
okay.
tool is for adults and heads of household. So the child that's born into a family that's already in the project isn't going to be tracked on this. So this, you don't have to track under 18 on this sheet. So that's the good news. I believe what HUD says for minors is they are the living situation of the adult is their living situation. So if the HMIS system is prompting you, it would be if the household is housed at the time of the birth, then they would be permanent housing. If they're not housed, if they're between housing, maybe they're in housing search still. There's a lot of things that can happen in your PSH programs. It would be wherever you think the adult's living, but they're not going to thankfully impact this. The report in Sage that's auto-calculating once you upload that CSV from HMIS should only be counting adults and heads of households who are minors. So you could have like a 17-year-old that's emancipated. Like there's allowable situations where the head of household might be a minor, there might be no one over 18. So the person who comes in, a
That's okay.
partner, is going to be wherever they were living, right? So if I come in, I'm currently single, and then I meet someone and they end up moving in with me, that's approved by the program, the bedroom
I don't
sizes,
see
right?
why
All those
not.
things.
I don't know.
Um,
Was he homeless
oh,
before he went into jeans?
good job. So the person who comes in after admission, if it's another adult, you would put what it is. But as you can see, that's going to trigger, it's going to look like you admitted someone who wasn't eligible because the report captures all adults, not just the person who is making the household eligible for it. So that's part of what, when you serve families, you might have more explanation because you might have two adults with the children, but you don't have to track children. This is just for the heads of households and the members who are 18 and over. And I also realized we've used a bunch of jargon. So again, if this is for new staff or if you're new to this, I'm just going to back up a half a second. COC is continuum of care program. CSV is a type of file, a type of Excel file that is exported out of the Homeless Management Information System, HMIS. And your software for your HMIS right now is Clarity. So basically, when you take the information out of Clarity, which is your HMIS software, that is where that first chart that I showed you is coming from. So I'm going to walk you through this to let you know like which pieces of data you're going to have to collect to put into here. And then we can run a couple examples for you to see how it works. But I'm going to start at the top of the page. The agency, the grant number, the grant name. Basically here you can see like I'm trying to click and I can't type everywhere. because we've locked the spreadsheet. So this is going to be, right, editable because Christy's going to pre-fill this for you. She's also going to have, I'm going to work in this example tab. There's a template, which is like the core document that you can use if you have to make copies. Each of you is going to have a separate tab for each of your programs. So I went simple. I said project A, project B, but each of these tabs will be for each of your PSH projects where you're a subrecipient to the state. And Christy's going to fill out this top part so you know agency, grant name, and grant number, what she's asking you for that matches the project name that is on going to be on the tab. So one of you may be getting a spreadsheet that has one tab. One of you may get a spreadsheet that has multiple tabs. We did create this to try and make it so that you can't accidentally break it because people are worried about sometimes worried about formatting. What you should be able to do is to type into anywhere that we would like you to type. And the reason for that is because there are formulas over here that Christy will be able to quickly match to the CSV file, right? To that Sage system to see if HMIS is matching your spreadsheet so that both of you will know quickly, this is easy. Christy can do it whenever she wants, or oops, we have a mismatch. Let's schedule some time so we can go back and figure out why HMIS is different than your data entry here. I'll also say HUD rolled this out fast, right? It was known as a problem, a solution was created. HMIS systems haven't caught up with it yet because the HUD solution of asking you to type in these explanations came so quickly. I'm hopeful in a year that HMIS will be able to better do and help you with this. But for now, this is the system we have to use. So just before that question comes up about why isn't HMIS helping with this, I hope they'll be able to in the future. It just got rolled out so fast. I don't think the HMIS vendors were told about it. So hopefully we can put some pressure on them to catch up and give us a tool within your HMIS data entry instead of external to it. So basically, you're going to have to enter the headers that you see at the top. We have HMIS ID. So that'll be whatever your number is in Clarity. I just made up numbers here, for example. You're going to let Christy know if this is the head of household or a member. That will help her and will help you when you're sorting out, trying to figure out who's missing or why it isn't matching the HMIS information. This is all just going to be a drop down. So those are the only two choices you're going to be able to enter into that field. The original project's entry date will go in one column, and the current project entry date is going to go in the second column. For those of you that haven't had this experience yet, basically what happens is you come into a PSH program. So let's say I was eligible in 2010. So I living in a shelter, I got referred to coordinated entry, came through the program, I got admitted. So my original start date was, say, December 1st, 2010. I stayed in my apartment for 10 years, but then I had to move. And I didn't have an apartment right away. I had to leave, maybe go live with my sister for a little bit while I was doing housing search. And then I moved into a new unit. HUD has instructed HMIS data entry to exit the person and then re-enter them. So if I have to move apartments and I'm in a PSH program, I originally came in 2010. In 2020, I may have moved. So I get exited in 2020 and I come back right in the next day, right? I come right back in the next day. But the system might show me as entering in 2020. So that is why we want both of these dates, because the homeless definition in 2010 will have been different than the homeless definition in 2020. So it could be the explanation is this person came in before the homeless definition changed. That is why we're asking for the original date and the project entry date, the current project entry date, if it's applicable. Maybe people didn't move, maybe they only have one. You should be able to find that in Clarity. It should be showing up in your list. If they're not, Christy and the state staff can work with ICA and you can figure out how to train people and where to get that information. An exit date, again, if it's applicable, exit termination date would be entered here. And then we get into the fun part of the spreadsheet, the entry living situation. This information in this column F should perfectly match whatever the person typing into HMIS is entering. So this is where they came from for the project entry that you're reporting on. And then these, whatever you put in column F, is going to determine what other questions you have to answer over in these other columns here. So entry living situation will then decide if you have to give an explanation. And then there's a column that says, like, how did you determine, like, how were they actually eligible? And then if you have other, then there's a place where you actually type in something. So I'll give you a kind of a quick example here. So let's put in a fake number. We'll say they're the, head of household. It came in 12/1/2024. Sorry, I'm just going to move the camera. It keeps showing up over where we're trying to type. Here, it's already preloaded with the types of situations that HUD wants you to report on. So if I say someone was coming from staying with family and friends, a temporary situation, right away, it triggers me to say, yes, please complete column H. And in column H, you have a fixed list of choices that you can pick from. So if you say someone is coming from temporary staying with family and friends, it's going to prompt you to complete column H. And you can say whatever the reason is. You could say they were imminent risk, or you can say, we'll say enrolled in project. So you can say there. That means you came from another PSH. You came from PSH. You maybe were between units, whatever it is. If I pick other here, then here I would say between units, or if I was a member, I would say like household member moved in from non-homeless situation. Just type something really quick. You don't want big paragraphs here, right? Like type in something really quick here. Whatever you put on this left-hand side, again, is going to sum over here. Each situation by each category, Christy's going to be able to see the counts to be able to match that up to the HUD tool. So it sounds simple. The filling out of the spreadsheet, I hope, is very simple for you. The challenge for your teams, or the request for your teams, is how are you going to operationalize this and get this done within your project? So you may be doing everything, right? Soup to nuts, intake, data entry, everything. You might have a bigger team where you take the person in and then you hand off the HMIS data entry. You need to decide who's going to fill out the spreadsheet and who's going to help proof this to make sure it stays current throughout the year. I would suggest if your HMIS data entry person has the bandwidth, they're already typing into HMIS, you should fill this out at the same time. That way you don't have any discrepancies. But at this point, Christy's not going to dictate that to you. You just have to come up with a process that is functional and makes it so that this is available, correctly filled out and matching HMIS within 30 days of the end of a grant term, because Christy has up to 90 days to submit the report. So you get 30 days to finish your data entry into HMIS, which is your clarity. Then make sure, just proof this spreadsheet, because of course you filled it out all year long, and then send that off to Christy. So I make it sound simple, but I know it's extra workload, so I'll just acknowledge that. And I think that's it. So it's basically another tracking tool until we can get HMIS to be able to give us this information in a different way, because HUD surprised us all. It was a lot of people found this by logging in to do their report, and ta-da, there was another form. So you're with a lot of your peers and catching up to this new HUD requirement that none of us expected. So Christy, anything I missed that you wanted me to say, or any questions from folks about what I said or what's going to be expected going forward?
The only thing that I would say to all of you is I know this has been new to all of you, but in our HMIS system, if you run an APR for your project, and I know ICA is not on the call, but if you export it as I think it's a web page PDF, you're able to click on, like if it says 5 clients came from temporary situations, you can click on that 5 and it will show you who they are. So if you need help with this, please let me know because I can show you all how to do this. And thank you, Lori Hathaway. But it's a really neat trick that if you do export your APR that way, you're able to like see which participants are where.
Yeah.
Yes, they're hyperlinks. Thanks, Lori. I don't have the right terms today.
And the instructions, like I said, will be right here. What I can do, so we wanted to do the training first, see what questions there were. I can even add, like I can't add full clarity instructions, but I can just put a little tip at the bottom of tip, like go to question 15, export. Like we can add a little bit of language here before Christy starts populating your grants in, just so that doesn't get lost if we all turn over. So Christy, I'll add that to the master and then send it to you to populate before it goes out to your subrecipients, if that works for you.
And then Mandy, in response to your question, there are going to be participants who roll into the project who aren't literally homeless. Like Melanie said, like you might have someone who gets married. So you might have someone who entered the grant who was literally homeless, and then they get married and that person moves into the household. So
yeah, no, I realize that. So for me, that would be the trigger. Any, like anything that changes in a household that might impact the status, or if the person isn't coming in from that literal homelessness threshold.
That's a really good question, Mandy. And we went back and forth on if you should track everyone or just the people that HUD's gonna have questions on. So the reason we went with everybody is because unfortunately, we're all human and only have so many hours in the day, and there's so much turnover in all the projects that if everyone was perfect, we could just do the people that HUD's gonna ask questions about. Inevitably, somebody's gonna get entered wrong. There's gonna be some reconciliation. So if you have everybody in the spreadsheet, you're gonna be able to quickly identify who's wrong and fix it instead of then having to pull all that information. So if it really becomes unmanageable, work it through, like if you get a really large grant. But the reason we included both the people that HUD's not gonna write count or make you write an explanation is because they're still gonna show up on the sheet. The HUD's gonna say, like, you have 15 people that came from eligible situation, like technically perfectly eligible situations. So that's why we did include everyone for the first iteration of this, because we know, unfortunately, there's gonna be a reconciliation until HMIS can catch up and do this kind of automatic, give you a report from there of everything you've already data entered. So I wasn't able to see the chat as I was talking with you all. So that is why we are also tracking the literal homeless folks. So.
And we've already run into a couple of issues with some of the APRs where there are participants who are showing up in the wrong category. And so we're trying to figure out why it is not showing correctly on the CSV file. Because like they entered from emergency shelter, and it's showing as temporary. So we're trying to make sure that things are in line, and it'll make it a lot easier. Like if we can see the spreadsheet so that I can see the HMIS ID number and we can go in and make sure those things are all corrected.
Were there other questions that came up while I was screen sharing that need to be answered? I don't see any. Are there any other questions that people have? Timeline, Christy, we were thinking, so we have one edit to make. I'll put in those tips about if it's not matching, like where to go in clarity, and which APR question this is so that people can match that quickly. And then I'll get it to Christy, and we were thinking of sending it out next week, early next week, so that you could have it and start populating it. Again, this is going to be due 30 days after the close of your grant term. And unfortunately, the grant terms are all different, so I can't tell you what day that is. But it'll be 30 days after your grant term. But we do suggest you try and, again, do it with your HMIS data entry. That way, hopefully you'll catch things really quickly and not have a lot of reconciliation during that last, month after the grant term ends.
And as per usual, every January, I send out all of your APR due dates. So I will be sending that out again in January for all of you. But I also encourage all of you to put a reminder in your calendars.
Good idea. Okay. Any other questions, concerns, or comments? Maybe we can be the trailblazers and do 45-minute meetings instead of an hour then. I think we're gonna set a trend here.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm Kathleen McDonald from the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. So first of all, we don't enter our data into an HMIS. We provide
Terrible.
the zip file. So the survivors who are in rapid rehousing, they don't have HMIS numbers because we don't have those. And also, they are by definition victims of domestic or sexual violence. So do we still need to do this?
The answer is yes. Let's talk about what you'll enter instead of HMIS ID. It's really HUD's integration and actual funding more of victim service provider agencies and people that are fleeing domestic violence that triggered this to be an overwhelming data entry mismatch for the field offices, because people fleeing domestic violence may be coming from a shelter and it might be really easy, but a lot of people fleeing, especially in rural areas, in New Hampshire, right? There's a lot of rural areas. They might be coming from a situation that HUD doesn't see as eligible. So it was actually, I think, the DV bonus threw the system over the edge, right? Them actually putting money towards all populations is what I think made this data piece unmanageable to do it report by report. So you do still have to do it. I'm open to suggestions, Christy or Kathleen, about what you want to enter. My idea is whatever you would give CE if you were doing referrals back and forth, but there might be another way. It's just you, Kathleen, just have to be able to code break if Christy comes back to you asking a question, right? So you can use whatever code you need to. And you and Christy and her team just might have to talk more because she can't prove it because she's not in your comparable database, which is your HMIS alternative.
Kathleen, you can use the unique identifiers that you've already set up with all of your member agencies.
Yep. Okay. So we can just use the client IDs that we have from our VILA database to.
Yes.
Okay.
And Kathleen, I'll make a note of that on the instructions, just so that people know. Is there a specific term that will help your agencies? Is it called a client ID? What's the terminology? Client ID.
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to put it as an asterisk and down below, because what I don't want is everyone else using client IDs that aren't HMIS, because some agencies have two systems also. So if you have an HMIS ID, that's going to be the preference. But I'll put a note for victim service providers to use the client ID instead.
Okay. And so the spreadsheet, I mean, the drop downs are built for the responses, but everything else, the individual, the rows for each survivor and their original date and all of that actually will have to be entered manually for each. Okay.
Yeah, so it's going to be a little bit of a lift in the beginning, but once you get it populated, it'll just be maintaining it. So I'm not loading teams right now. So you can see here, this may be the majority, right, explanation that you all end up entering for the rapid domestic violence bonus project. So it could be temporary living with family and friends or permanent living with family and friends. And then on how the eligibility was documented, this column here, column H, should
Mhm.
reflect if I did pull your chart out, what am I going to see? Right? So that's what column H is this is what would match what HUD would review if they came to review your project.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good.
Those are great questions. Are there any other questions or clarifications that folks had? If not, then what I'll do is I'll make those edits. Christy, I'll get you that file by the end of today. And that way you have some space to work on it before sending it out to the subrecipients. If you have any questions as you're going through, please do, ask and we can make some edits. But if you have questions, ask them now because we don't want to keep publishing. We don't want to create confusion by publishing multiple spreadsheets to everyone and then losing version control. So if you think of anything, please ask Christy and she'll bump the question up to me if it doesn't come up in the next couple of minutes. Angie, you asked if people are homeless and moving into. So thankfully, this I don't know what your local policy is. I don't think you do. It's the head of household that has to qualify. But I would also say be internally consistent. If you have something that says, I'm coming in, I'm not living in a shelter, but I don't know of anything where HUD says you have to verify the household member's living situation because they're not qualifying for the program. But because household members don't have to qualify particularly, that's why we're doing this wonderful spreadsheet.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't have to do an extra step just in case, because we all know how HUD works. So I just wanted to be ahead of the
Exactly.
curve if that was the case.
And that's why it's like when you're training your staff and you're talking about this, make sure you're like, this is nothing to do with program intake, right? Like this is purely a data entry exercise because of some of the HMIS data entry standard changes and because HUD never thought they'd get beyond category 1 literal homeless, right? Like these two things have converged and created another tracking thing for you in hopefully the short term. So.
And not to throw a curveball, there's only one catch-22 where household members may be eligible to continue to receive COC assistance if the head of household becomes incarcerated or passes away.
Yep.
Or becomes institutionalized.
Yeah. So if it's easy to get, so I would say if we're coming out of the spreadsheet mode and going into just program management, if it's easy to get, I would if it's already in HMIS because they were in a shelter too, I would put that in your file in case the primary person passes away. You'll more easily be able to transfer them over to the voucher if they have the disability and the homelessness. But yeah, so you don't have to, but you may want to if it's easily accessible. Pop that in your file. Okay. Okay, then I'm gonna go make those edits, reach out with any questions as you go along. And again, all of us will lobby for how to push this requirement up to HMIS software providers so that hopefully we can get a more automated solution for the future. Exactly. Everyone was surprised. I had bunches of calls from clients that like, there's a new form. I can't submit my APR. It's due tomorrow. I was like, what are you talking about? And I had to go watch the video that had published without really talking about it. So we're all in it together.
And of course, they released it at like the same time as NOFO. So we were all scrambling.
Of course. So, okay.
I was like, why does Heidi need this information from me?
Uh-huh.
What's happening?
Uh-huh.
I'm in Atlanta. I can't help. And y'all were in the same boat, right? It's
Yes.
like perilous.
I
Yeah.
know. We're all like, hey, here's a curveball.
Yeah.
And a lot
Surprise.
of you, not the ICP grants, but the COC grants, like I would actually typically ask you some of these questions, or even questions about their exit destinations, which HUD may even start asking about those moving forward. So some of you were kind of used to this, but I know for YHCP it was relatively new as well.
Yeah. It was a surprise for everybody. So good.
And the only other thing is, Melanie and I also worked on an APR proofing checklist. So that will be coming out too in the new year as well. So
Yeah, it's really meant we can do another train. We can do like a quick call on that, but basically it's a checklist to be like, is it internally consistent? What are the things that are going to stop it from going through the Sage system, or make HUD call Christy and then Christy's going to call you? So you just did a kind of quick proofing, like if when I was in your shoes, I had 24 grants. So like, how do I get them not kicked back from HUD? So we just kind of put that into a one pager of
Yep.
like how to proof it. And it's a good onboarding tool too for like staff who are like doing that piece of the job. So
So for all those fun questions when I say there's a data quality issue or X, Y, and Z when I send your APRs back to you. So
yeah.
we'll be sharing that with you. We have lots of big things coming in 2025, including new staff. So stay tuned.
Good. Okay, well, thank you everyone. Have a good holiday season and a happy new year. And I'm sure I'll see you in 2025.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.